Book 2. Begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, all of them due to offenders' ignorance of what is good or evil. But for my part, I have long perceived the nature of good and its nobility, the nature of evil and its meanness, and also the nature of the culprit himself, who is my brother, not in a physical sense, but as a fellow creature, similarly endowed with reason and a share of the divine. Therefore, none of those things can injure me, for nobody can implicate me in what is degrading. Neither can I be angry with my brother or fall foul of him, for he and I were born to work together, like a man's 2 hands, feet, or eyelids, or like the upper and lower rows of his teeth. To obstruct each other is against nature's law, and what is irritation and aversion but a form of obstruction? A little flesh, a little breath, and reason to rule all. That is myself. Forget your books. No more hankering for them. They were no part of your equipment. As one already on the threshold of death, think nothing of the first, of its viscid blood, its bones, its web of nerves and veins and arteries. The breath too, what is that? A whiff of wind, and not even the same wind, but every moment puffed out and drawn in anew. But the third, the reason, the master, on this you must concentrate. Now your hairs are grey, let it play the part of a slave no more, twitching puppet-wise at every pole of self-interest, and cease to fume at destiny by ever grumbling at today or lamenting over tomorrow. The whole divine economy is pervaded by providence. Even the vagaries of chance have their place in nature's scheme, that is, in the intricate tapestry of its ordinances of providence. Providence is the source from which all things flow, and allied with it is necessity and the welfare of the universe. You yourself are a part of that universe, and for any one of nature's parts, that which is assigned to it by the world nature, or helps to keep it in being, is good. Moreover, what keeps the whole world in being is change, not merely change of the basic elements, but also change of the larger formations they compose. On these thoughts rest content, and ever hold them as principles. Forget your thirst for books, so that when your end comes, you may not murmur, but meet it with a good grace, and with unfeigned gratitude in your heart to the gods. Think of your many years of procrastination, how the gods have repeatedly granted you further periods of grace, of which you have taken no advantage. It is time now to realize the nature of the universe to which you belong, and of that controlling power whose offspring you are, and to understand that your time has a limit set to it. Use it, then, to advance your enlightenment, or it will be gone, and never in your power again. Hour by hour, resolve firmly, like a Roman and a man, to do what comes to hand with correct and natural dignity, and with humanity, independence, and justice. Allow your mind freedom for all other considerations. This you can do, if you will approach each action as though it were your last, dismissing the wayward thought, the emotional recoil from the commands of reason, the desire to create an impression, and the admiration of the self, the discontent with your lot. See how little a man needs to master, for his days to flow on in quietness and piety. He has but to observe these few counsels, and the gods will ask nothing more. Wrong, wrong, thou art doing to thyself, O my soul, and all too soon thou shalt have no more time to do thyself right. Man has but one life, already thine is nearing its close. Yet still hast thou no eye to thine own honour, but art staking thy happiness on the soul of other men. Are you distracted by outward cares? Then allow yourself a space of quiet, wherein you can add to your knowledge of the good, and learn to curb your restlessness. Guard also against another kind of error, the folly of those who weary their days in much business, but lack any aim on which the whole effort, nay, the whole thought, is focused. You will not easily find a man coming to grief through indifference to the workings of another's soul, but for those who pay no heed to the motions of their own, unhappiness is their sure reward. Remembering always what the world nature is, and what my own nature is, and how the one stands in respect to the other, so small a fraction of vast whole, bear in mind that no man can hinder you from conforming each word and deed to the nature of which you are part. When Theophrastus is comparing sins, so far as they are commonly acknowledged to be comparable, he affirms the philosophic truth that sins of desire are more culpable than sins of passion. For passion's revulsion from reason, at least, seems to bring with it a certain discomfort and a half-felt sense of constraint, whereas sins of desire, in which pleasure predominates, indicate a more self-indulgent and womanish disposition. Both experience and philosophy, then, support the contention that a sin which is pleasurable deserves greater censure than one which is painful. In the one case, the offender is like a man stung into an involuntary loss of control by some injustice. In the other, eagerness to gratify his desire moves him to do wrong of his own volition. In all you do, or say, or think, recollect that at any time the power of withdrawal from life is in your own hands. If gods exist, you have nothing to fear in taking leave of mankind, for they will not let you come to harm. But if there are no gods, or if you have no concern with mortal affairs, what is life to me in a world devoid of gods or devoid of providence? Gods, however, do exist, and do concern themselves with the world of men. They have given us full power not to fall into any of the absolute evils, and if there were real evil in one's other experiences, they would have provided for that too, so that avoidance of it could lie within every man's ability. But when a thing does not worsen the man himself, how can it worsen the life he lives? The world nature cannot have been so ignorant as to overlook a hazard of this kind, nor, if aware of it, have been unable to devise a safeguard or a remedy. Neither want of power, nor want of skill, could have led nature into error of allowing good and evil to be visited indiscriminately on the virtuous and sinful alike. Yet living and dying, honour and dishonour, pain and pleasure, riches and poverty, and so forth, are equally the lot of good men and bad. Things like these neither elevate nor degrade, and therefore they are more good than they are evil. Our mental powers should enable us to perceive the swiftness with which all things vanish away, their bodies in the world of space, and their remembrance in the world of time. We should also observe the nature of all objects of sense, particularly such as allure us with pleasure, or affright us with pain, or are clamorously urged upon us by the voice of self-conceit, the cheapness and contemptibility of them, how sordid they are, and how quickly fading and dead. We should discern the true worth of those whose word and opinion confer reputations. We should apprehend too the nature of death, and that if only it be steadily contemplated, and the fancies we associate with it be mentally dissected, it will soon come to be thought of as no more than a process of nature, and only children are scared by natural process, or rather something more than the mere process, a positive contribution to nature's well-being. Also, we can learn how man has contact with God, and with which part of himself this is maintained, and how that part fares after its removal hence. Nothing is more melancholy than to compass the whole creation, probing into the deeps of earth, as the poet says, and peering curiously into the secrets of others' souls, without once understanding that to hold fast to the divine spirit within and serve it loyally is all that is needful. Such service involves keeping it pure from passion and from aimlessness and from discontent with the works of gods or men, for the former of these works deserve our reverence for their excellence, the latter our goodwill for fraternity's sake, and at times perhaps our pity too, because of men's ignorance of good and evil, an infirmity as crippling as the inability to distinguish black from white. Were you to live 3,000 years, or even 30,000, remember that the whole soul life which a man can lose is that which he is living at the moment, and furthermore, that he can have no other life except the one he loses. This means that the longest life and the shortest amount to the same thing, for the passing minute is every man's equal possession, but what has once gone by is not ours. Our loss, therefore, is limited to that one fleeting instant, since no one can lose what is already past, nor yet what is still to come, for how can he be deprived of what he does not possess? So two things should be borne in mind. First, that all the cycles of creation, since the beginning of time, exhibit the same recurring pattern, so that it can make no difference whether you watch the identical spectacle for 100 years or for 200, or forever. Secondly, that when the longest and the shortest lived of us come to die, their loss is precisely equal, for the sole thing of which any man can be deprived is the presence, since this is all he owns, and nobody can lose what is not his. There are obvious objections to the cynic Monimus's statement that things are determined by the view taken of them, but the value of his aphorism is equally obvious if we admit the substance of it so far as it contains a truth. For a human soul, the greatest of self-inflicted wrongs is to make itself, so far as it is able to do so, a kind of a tumour or abscess on the universe, for to quarrel with circumstances is always a rebellion against nature, and nature includes the nature of each individual part. Another wrong, again, is to reject a fellow creature or oppose him with malicious intent, as men do when they are angry. A third, to surrender to pleasure or pain. A fourth, to dissemble and show insincerity or falsity in word or deed. A fifth, for the soul to direct its acts and endeavours to no particular object, and waste its energies purposelessly and without due thought. For even the last of our activities ought to have some end in view, and for creatures with reason, and end is conformity with the reason and law of the primordial city and commonwealth. In the life of man, his time is but a moment, his being an incessant flux, his senses a dim rushlight, his body a prey of worms, his soul an unquiet eddy, his fortune dark, and his fame doubtful. In short, all that is of the body is as coursing waters, all that is of the soul as dreams and vapours, life a warfare, a brief sojourning in an alien land, and after repute, oblivion. Where then can man find the power to guide and guard his steps? In one thing, and one thing alone, philosophy. To be a philosopher is to keep unsullied and unscathed the divine spirit within him, so that it may transcend all pleasure and all pain, take nothing in hand without purpose, and nothing falsely or with dissimulation, depend not on another's actions or inactions, accept each and every dispensation as coming from the same source as itself, and last and chief, wait with a good grace for death, and no more than a simple dissolving of the elements whereof each living thing is composed. If those elements themselves take no harm from their ceaseless forming and reforming, why look with mistrust upon the change and dissolution of the whole? It is but nature's way, and in the ways of nature there is no evil to be found.